Okay, so this is the session, as Susan said, where we're exploring international connections at the organizational and individual levels. Next.
We seem to have lost you, Leslie.
Please check in using the session notes. Next. Oh, at this. Is this working?
At the moment, yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, and I've done my land acknowledgement. I am participating from the lands of the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people in Canberra. I acknowledge their continuing contribution and connection to their culture and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. And we each have a responsibility to consider what it means to acknowledge the history and legacy of colonialism in our history as a nation and as a community. Throughout the discussion during the session and throughout the ESIP winter meeting, we will acknowledge the privileges we enjoy because of colonialism, but strive to not perpetuate these in the future. Next. The graphic I have used on the left is a graphic from the local Ngunnawal people, and it is the name of our supercomputer at NCI, which is Gardi. And I thought very symbolic for this session, the gathering of knowledge from different places and sources and the bringing together of an even greater collective knowledge system. Next. So what we want to ascertain is current participation by ESIP at an organizational level and of individuals in ESIP activities, and determine whether these should be enhanced or left as is. And as I said, we're going to do it at the organizational level and at the level of an individual cluster or person. Next. So we're going to, I'll just doing the welcome bit now. Then we're going to do short presentations to set the scene, and I've allowed time if some of you would like to contribute to international activities you are doing, then please tell us. We've got time, so I'm just giving you something to prepare. We'll then have open discussion, hopefully using Slido and Jamboard, but I have a backup that all questions are in the notes, so you can fill them out in the notes, which currently are in page 4. And then we'll have a synthesis and determine the 3 key takeaways and then discuss whether we need any next steps. Next. So why are we having this session? In October 2017, the board considered a white paper on what its international role could be and discussed 4 options. ESIP is primarily a US organization. 3, ESIP is an international facilitator. And 4, it is a US organization with strategic international initiatives. The board
lost you again, Leslie.
Staff to experiment and report on outcome, primarily a US organization, but there were multiple meetings participated. There were multiple meetings in Australia. Am I back again? EGU, RDA. And I just wanted to say that 2020, it all came crashing down because COVID restricted all travel. And I was about to say that we actually had a meeting planned with 150 people registered. So now we're going to explore what we are doing in 2023 in options 3 and 4. Next. The paradox is not an international organization, but other organizations have similar aspirations to ESIP and are asking equivalent questions on contributions of data to the stewardship of the planet. To contribute to the goal of global informatics, ESIP needs to be aware of other international groups and even promote its endorsed guidelines. But ESIP cannot be everywhere. So how do we prioritize ESIP's international opportunities? Next. So I'll now hand over to Susan, who's going to give us an overview of ESIP's international roles. Thank you, Susan.
Switching from Leslie's presentation to my presentation. Thank you for that, Leslie. And your resilience in pushing through bad Wi-Fi is really admirable. So I think we were actually able to get the hang of that. One day I hope to be able to speak quite as quickly as you can when the computers are catching up for their lagginess. Really excited to explore this topic with you all and wanted to give a little bit of context for me personally before we dive in. So from an international perspective, so I grew up a mile from the Canadian border. So international perspectives have always been a part of my life and my passion. I grew up learning to understand my temperatures in Celsius and listen to radio stations out of Toronto. I first got to study in another country at the age of 16, where I spent a month in Normandy in France. And so that really ignited my passion for international work, and what led me to become an international studies major in college. I majored in international studies with a concentration in development and a minor in environmental policy. For those of you that attended the opening plenary, you know, I've spent some time in Africa, getting in trouble, not getting in trouble, you know, all that good stuff, learning languages. And early in my career, I worked with Conservation International, both in DC and in their field office. I worked with the World Bank and their Global Environment Facility for 2 summers. And then my first 3 years of my career, I was a USAID consultant. So international work is something that I am very passionate about. And it's one of my favorite classes that I took in undergrad was called Beyond Sovereignty. And it was really focusing on what are these challenges that span beyond national borders, and how do we solve them, right? And I think that falls right into ESIP, right? You know, data is not confined by borders. Satellite data especially is not confined by borders. But the work that we're doing also, you know, can't and shouldn't be confined by borders, especially if we're looking at issues like environmental justice. So I just wanted to provide that personal take, so you know, when I'm thinking about ESIP and when I'm thinking about our potential reach and our goals, I do see, you know, this global world. So as Leslie pointed out, we had this white paper in 2017 that was authored by Mark Parsons and Karen Moe, to my knowledge, that laid out 4 options for ESIP's path forward. And the discussions from the board meeting that followed landed on that ESIP is primarily a US-based organization. And I believe that is primarily because that is where our current funding is. And that is where our staff is today. And the board directed ESIP, whoops, didn't mean to go backward. Sorry about that. ESIP, anyway, you get the idea. ESIP board directed the organization at the time to be a US-based organization, but experiment a little bit in strategic and as an international facilitator, that option 3, and experiment a little bit in that option 4. And as Leslie said, in 2018 and 2019, ESIP really did that. And I will credit, it wasn't just staff led, because the staff can't be everywhere. With the staff of, at the time, I think it was 3, now we're 5. We still can't be everywhere, but I know there are many ESIP volunteers who have traveled for ESIP, represented ESIP at various international conferences. So I wanted to give you, and then as Leslie said, in 2019, the board focus really shifted towards a succession plan for the change in the executive director of the organization. And then in 2020, when I started, right, like we were right in the middle of that COVID shift. And so I wanted to give you a snapshot of kind of where ESIP is today in 2023. And one of the things I'm pretty passionate about is practicing what we preach and using data to understand the community. We just got a new database, which I'll tell you more about tomorrow in the closing plenary, but trying to use that to better understand and get a pulse and share that to help us make decisions strategically about what we should do based on what we know about our community. So of our ESIP partner organizations, because ESIP is an organization of organizations, while it's really all about the amazing individuals, we are a partner organization. We currently have 176 partners. 8 of those partners come from outside the United States. Most in Australia. We have a New Zealand partner, a German partner, and a Canadian partner. So only 4.5% of our partners come from outside of the United States. Now, our ESIP update, our mailing list, you don't have to, it's much easier to get on the mailing list than to become a partner, even though we're trying to make being a partner very easy. 263 of our over 1,500 subscribers come from outside of the United States. So that is 17% of our subscribers. An interesting stat with our mailing list, and one of the tactics we've employed is, so that mailing list, right? Like if we sent out an email, if we sent out the ESIP update to everybody at the exact same time, some of you are getting it at 2 in the morning and some of you would get it at 2 in the afternoon. And we actually, when we brought on Allison to be our communications manager, one of the things she did was implement a trick called time warp. And we actually send that ESIP update. It actually automatically goes out in the best times at the best time of day based on the time zone that you are in to hopefully increase our open rates. So that's one little thing we've done to try and be more internationally friendly so that you're not getting emails from ESIP in the middle of the night if you are not in the United States. But we have subscribers in every time zone in the world except 3. And those 3 are in the middle of oceans. Not a whole lot of people there. There's probably somebody, but so I just thought that was a really fun statistic. Looking at our website, Allison provided these stats for us. On the left is kind of just 1 week in January, and on the right is over the course of a year. Again, you can see the primary users and web traffic to esipfed.org. This is not the wiki, and it's not everything, but esipfed.org is predominantly United States based. But if you look over the course of the year, now whether are they crawlers or is it legitimate traffic, hard to say. We do get, we do cover a pretty good portion of the globe that somebody is coming to our website at some point in time. This graph I shared with our board at the recent ESIP board meeting, just trying to track what our ESIP meeting attendance looks like. And this is from the start of us using our current registration platform. So ESIP meeting attendance has really grown over time. The green bars represent hybrid only meetings, such as the one you're at right now, and that bar needs to go a little higher because we had more people register. And then this blue bar here, this was, I would say, I'd love to make this a different color because that actually was that hybrid meeting, if you recall. And then last night I tried, not easy, data's not perfect and beautiful all the time, right? I tried to tease out what percentage or what number of those meeting participants were international from each of those meetings. So we went from, looking at my notes, we had less than a handful back in 2019, 1 to 2% of our attendees. And then the highest was a high of 33 attendees. We had 33 both in the summer of 21 and in the winter of 22, with 7 to 10% of the attendees at a meeting being international. It's not a surprise to me that in these meetings where we have had more virtual elements, we have higher international participation. Megan also pointed out that some of that, I believe in I think it was the summer 2020 meeting, we've experimented with some things like evening Australia friendly time plenary slots, which brought in more people. Sometimes there were side meetings, maybe in that summer of 2019, where the attendees had to register from the side meeting for the main meeting. So there are reasons why that can go up and down, but I wanted to show that like international participation in ESIP has not actually plummeted from a meetings perspective. A couple other things that we have done. So in this time period, you know, we explored international, you know, attended different meetings, and I think that Carl and others will speak to some of that exploration. An interesting thing that has happened with the staff is, so the number of clusters that ESIP supported, I think that's the end of my slide, so I can stop sharing. Between 2018 and now, ESIP has added, we have initiated over 20 new clusters. We had 7 go on hiatus, so we gained about 14, 15 clusters, which is about a 50% growth in the number of clusters that the staff are supporting. We also really kicked off our data help desk efforts, and that was one way that we were engaging with EGU. So that's another kind of outreach and potential international arm. And then we've explored with some ideas and ways to make ESIP more accessible to the international audiences. As I said, the email timing, working with folks to say if there is a cluster that someone or a certain community is really interested with engaging, how can we schedule that at a more international friendly time, or rotate, posting recordings of sessions and having tools like our wiki, Slack, our YouTube channel, where things can be posted and there can be asynchronous engagement on it, right? Like that discussion can happen in Slack, and it doesn't have to be all done in a certain, you know, 1 hour window, right? You can start that conversation and it can happen over the course of 24, 48 hours so that people can participate when they are able. So those are just a few of the ways that we have tried to make ESIP, although we are US funded and US based, allow for more international engagement. So I just wanted to provide that perspective kind of on, and some data on where we are today in 2023. Back to you, Leslie.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. Now we'll pass on to Carl, who's going to talk about ESIP's participation in GEO, which was formalized several years ago and has probably been ESIP's longest standing formal collaboration in an international group. Over to you, Carl.
Okay, so I guess I should probably, given our network issues, share my screen. Okay, see if I can do this in a way that will work.
I have your slides if you want me to do it.
If you can't, if you've got, yeah, it would be probably easier if we maybe just run from a single computer, if that might save the swapping around.
There you go.
Okay, so yeah, this is primarily focused on talking about our organizational engagements with the Group on Earth Observations over quite a while. And next slide, please. And as Leslie said, that ESIP actually has been engaged in GEO from the very early stages, first as an observer, and then as a participating organization. And as the GEO governance model has evolved, that level of participation, especially as a participating organization, has allowed us to have a seat at the table in the GEO governance model through their plenary meetings, but also in 2016 as members of the GEO program board, which does not include all of the GEO member organizations and participating organizations. There's a nomination and selection process, but based on the value and contributions and the importance of ESIP, we've been successful in maintaining our role in the program board essentially since GEO established it as an additional element of its governance model. And a lot of that, I think, can be ascribed to Kathy Fontaine's continuous engagement as our primary representative to the program board, and before that as active GEO participant in their other governance for all that time. And then I and others, especially our executive directors, have then often served as alternate members of the program board as well. But I certainly have to acknowledge Kathy's heavy lift for many years now in serving as our primary representative. But that also, it's important to acknowledge, and this is something I think that we should look at more closely, is we have a lot of ESIP organizational and individual members who are otherwise active in GEO. And this is an area where we can potentially reinforce our connectivity with GEO and other international organizations through our community participants. Next slide, please. So the last thing that I wanted to highlight here is, what we've been doing lately in terms of our work with GEO. Is we're continuing our participation in the program board. We just submitted our nomination and were approved for a new 3-year term as an organization, as a member of the program board. The program board work that we've been contributing to includes Kathy's work in establishing and serving on the awards committee for the program board, our work in providing feedback and review for the entire essentially work program for GEO as it was coming up for consideration. And that was a significant activity last fall and summer. And then just general participation and in the program board's activities in their quarterly meetings. Another area where I've been probably spending the bulk of my time working with GEO is in the data working group, participating in the overall data working group activities, but in particular focusing on the data sharing and data management principles subgroup for the working group, and doing some work with the rest of the working group, looking at the connectivity between the principles out of GEO and other life cycle models and principles that in many cases are much more familiar and more broadly familiar, and looking at ways where GEO's principles can both complement and also contribute to success in achieving those principles. And this is also work on updating the existing principles document. So these are some of the more recent activities that we've been having in our engagement with GEO organizationally. Again, I think part of the conversation we'd like to have here is identifying where some of our individual organizational connections might already also exist to help have a better understanding of where those connections are. And with that, I am done.
Thank you very much, Carl. Does anyone have any questions of Carl? And I should have asked if anyone had any questions of Susan. Nothing in the chat. Okay, all right. So thank you for the oversight on GEO. This is another official group in RDA, and it's actually called the ESIP RDA Earth, Space and Environmental Science Interest Group. And I have a link to the webpage there if you want it. Next, please. Okay, so it's co-chaired by Helen, Danny, Shelley, Pedro from Brazil, and myself. It's interesting that it started at the RDA plenary in Montreal in 2017 by EarthCube, exploring the potential for international partners. And that was run by Mohan and Kirsten Leonard. And what actually happened was groups like ENVRI, EPOS, AIDA, Oscope, which was me, EGU, AG all turned up and said, well, why are we doing this as like East Earth Cube to the international community? Why don't we get these infrastructures together in this group, and we share our developments in infrastructures? And we have two key outputs: a data infrastructure catalog, which is a catalog of anyone who's building any data or information infrastructure anywhere, and a semantic resources catalog, which is a list of vocabs, ontologies, etc., that people have online. And these have been ticking over now for about 5 years, and every time I open them, someone's added something to it. And so in essence, it's a group that raises awareness of who is doing what where. And in particular, we are trying to target the global south, meaning Africa, Asia, and South America. Next. As I said, we're working towards harmonizing efforts in Earth and Space Science Informatics, reduce duplication, share use case, and promote partnerships and adoption. But it is, as I said, the ESIP RDA. And so we try and encourage ESIP clusters and members to showcase their work internationally. And groups that have done this so far and is the Information Quality Cluster. Danny Kincaid has been presenting for some time in the ESIP COPDES cluster, coordinating and preserving scholarly publication processes. And it's about to be proposed as an RDA working group. And the complex citation work that Shelley, Deb Agrawal, Martina Stockhouse, and I have been doing, we've brought that to ESIP on a couple of occasions, and it's almost endorsed as a working group. It also is a venue where you can help advertise ESIP endorsed guidelines. And so it's an open invitation to get in touch if you want to have time at one of our plenaries, because it's a rather, what can I say, neat way for ESIP to for ESIP to showcase and get feedback on what they're doing in international audiences. And if you sign up to the group, you can also use the mailing list to help connect your work internationally. Okay, so that's next. All right, so that's the introduction to the ESIP RDA interest group. So please do let me know, because I'm always after people to help make presentations and advertise ESIP's work internationally. So now I'll move on to the next. Oh, sorry, are there any questions about the RDA group?
Hey, Leslie.
Okay. Yeah, go.
This is Dave Jones. I was just trying to look up in my folders, but I believe that we presented the disaster lifecycle cluster and the operational readiness levels to the RDA a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But I haven't found the file yet.
I think you might have. I'm sorry if I missed you, because we've been going since plenary, whatever it is, since 2017. We've presented at every plenary. And we've either have what we call lightning talks, where you can have a short 5-minute presentation, or deep dives. We've had so many lightning presentations, I can't quite remember. Anyway, that's the opportunity that's there. Okay, so E2SIP was an earth and environmental science, it's down under cluster, and we actually have a page on the cluster. Next. Oh, sorry, I'll just answer Mark's question. Yes, I agree that there has been ESIP members and ESIP participating in RDA, and it's the same with GEO. There's a lot of participation of ESIP partners and people in GEO and in RDA. And I guess the ultimate question is that participating as yourself, your own organization, or as ESIP? And I guess that's where it does, this international participation does get fuzzy, not fussy. Okay, so how E2SIP started was a couple of Australians like myself, Jens Klump and Simon Cox, could see the fabulous work that was going on in ESIP, which was well ahead of anything we had in Australia, and we wanted to connect in. And so we were trying to figure out a way to collaborate, but as Susan said, the time zones were a killer. And so we sort of were trying to come up with a model where we could have a partner informal group in Australia to help coordinate the connections. And that was where E2SIP was born. Susan, we need to check our stats because I've got that there are 8 ANZ partners, and you said there are 8, including Canada and Germany. But anyway, there are Australian partners. And the catalyst for the experiment was this symposium we had in May 2017, and we had at least 4 ESIP people funded to come out for it. The current chairs are myself and Simon, and I think most of you know Simon retired in January, that's now, and I'm also trying to say, well, what do I do with this and how do I take it forward? And there are several members of ANZ and New Zealand people in ESIP clusters, but the time zones make it hard. Next. And I guess I thought I'd put this in because, as Susan said, we were going gangbusters, and then COVID hit. And before COVID, the last meeting, I think we had 10 Australians. And before COVID, everyone fought to go to meetings like this. When conferences went virtual, attendances dropped off within a year. And I think we actually saw that in Susan's statistics, that when we went virtual, everyone started to participate, but it dropped off. Now COVID's over, airfares are horrendous, and like Australian participation in AGU and ESIP has not picked up at all. And it's hard to even get people to attend and participate in online collaborative projects. And that's just a gripe I've got at the moment. We've got some well-funded projects that don't include international collaboration. Is this why it's dropped off? Are time zones the killer? Do we need to work harder at genuine inclusive online participation? And next slide, please. Yeah, I just thought I'd show you, this is a joke I say, and I always love it when a doodle poll comes round. And when you're in Australia and you share a time zone with Eastern Siberia, you can be pretty sure that the time zones you pick are not going to be what everybody else picks. So again, I'm just saying it's this time zone challenge for international collaboration. So I don't think we'll ever go back to the level of travel that we had before, but what is it we've got to do to make it work better? Next. And we've had a very successful and community of practice between an ESIP cluster and an ARDC group, and it's been led by Ming Fang. And that link is to a poster that Ming has in the showcase. And Ming's actually on holidays this week, but she's kindly turned up. So Ming, do you want to say something about how you got it to work? I did do a couple of slides for you because I didn't know whether you were coming.
No. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So I just found this morning I needed to say something in this session. So I'm working for Australia Research Data Commons. Among many my jobs at ARDC, one of the job is leading the community of practice in number of topics in software, earlier in software management, but recently in data data quality. So I I don't have a stack of slides to organize, but just talking about my personal experience collaborating with ESIP clusters, not just data quality, but a number of them at a different level. So all collaborations through my participation, the physical attendance of ESIP summer meeting in 2018. When I was there, I was just mind-blown, and so many topics and knowledges we here can tap into. So consequently, I invite the environment sensor cluster to give a talk to introduce their work of the cluster to our community here, and the link is there. You see the scatter structure, and kindly lead a group of people give that a tech talk. And then we also organized a tech talk for the data quality information quality cluster. So that's the poster one. I'm going to share with you the poster. Sorry.
While you're getting it set up, Mark, I see you're asking a question. Do you want to ask your question?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Just quick. You had that slide that E2SIP really died with COVID. And then the whole time zone issue. I thought the whole point of E2SIP was that it was sort of its own thing. You know, it coordinated and collaborated with ESIP. But so aren't there E2SIP meetings by them, just you Aussies getting together?
No, that's fallen off. What I'm actually saying is that in Australia, since COVID hit, overall, there is not much participation. It's not just ESIP, dropped off, AGU, SC, COVID. The issue that people have dropped off because the time zones made it too hard to be in the meetings. But yeah, even getting something together in Australia to discuss international practices is not working that well either. Okay. I'm just stating fact. I don't understand the reasons. So Ming, could you continue?
Yeah, do you see my screen properly?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So so we have the collaboration with the information quality cluster for 4 years now. So the initial motivation is to connect, align the community of practice to facilitate the knowledge exchange. Also, we can collaborate and develop on the recommendations, and we thought that collaboration will help us to improve the update take of the best practice. The 4 years collaboration started in 2019 when the co-chairs of members of ESIP IQC presented at the tech talk I just talked about, and also the E2SIP sessions. With the encouragement of the IQC co-chairs, and we start to organize our local interest group called Australia and New Zealand Data Quality Interest Group. And so from 2020, and Leslie just talking about these time zones that ESIP meeting is hard for people from Australia to attend. So what we did is we organized a pre-ESIP workshop ahead of the ESIP plenary ESIP meeting. Then we gave the feedback what we discussed in our pre-ESIP workshop to the data quality, to the information quality cluster session at ESIP. I think that worked very well. And since 2021, so we two groups, and also in cooperation with other international groups, for example, the OGC data quality working group and Barcelona Supercomputing Center, the data quality group, to working on the guidelines, and also to organize event at the international platform, for example, the Science DataCon and RDA plenary. And we continue that fashion in 2022, we have our members to introduce the best practice in the marine data quality into the ESIP, the information quality session at the ESIP meetings, and continue to push that guideline and to at the international level. That's the data quality information and the working group we're trying to set up at the RDA. Yeah, so through these 4 years of collaboration, so we did enable the knowledge sharing, and because we reach out community globally, so we are able to collect more use cases that feed back into the guideline, the development, so that the guideline maturity to be globally representative. So that kind of collaboration and between the two groups, and also with other international groups in that topic, data quality information topic, could be as a model for wider international virtual data information quality communities. And David just talking about, he gave presentation. I think, David, probably you gave a webinar to one of our forum here in Australia. I'm not sure if you can see my screen, but here is the recording of the webinar. You talked about you talk about manage disaster through improved data-driven decision. And
Okay.
yes, that's the collaboration.
We need to move on.
Yeah. That's just end up. That's a collaboration between the two groups on the data quality, but we do also have a collaboration with the scheme.org cluster through the RDA Research Data Alliance working group. I just put the link in chat. You can see co-chairs of that cluster are closely collaborated on that topic. Okay, that's over to you, Leslie.
All right, thanks. Can you go back to my slides? Mark, do you still have your hand up? No, right, okay. If Susan can go back to my slides. Just go back one, please. Oh, okay. So what I was trying to bring out in the data quality group was that it's like you've got the two clusters running parallel within their own time zones, within their own, whatever you want to call it, comfort zones. But we have speakers from each group presented at each other's meetings. We jointly organize sessions and we collaborate in development of publications. And seems to be a model that's been fairly successful. Now, next slide, please. I'm just asking, does anyone in the audience want to say something about some collaboration that or international connection that they know involves ESIP, please? And I see Abby's put a comment there. That's the other way of doing it, that you run your meetings twice on the person who attends both meetings. Okay, well, if nobody's got any other questions.
I see Carl and Abby have hands up. Carl first.
Carl, go for it.
Sure. I probably have just a little bit more of a historic context that I can add in terms of we did for a while in the late 90s and early aughts have fairly regular participation in ISRSE. And I think that was largely linked to our sort of leadership connections with the organizers of the conference. And that was a combination of exhibits and then other participation. So that has been a historic venue for ESIP engagement, but I have not been, I think, hearing about the continuation of that in more recent years. There was a brief flirtation with engagement with IGARs, as we also had an exhibit that we did for at least one IGARs meeting. But that's been a sort of another dimension of our engagement, is sort of waving the flag at international conferences on behalf of ESIP and the community, and also providing a platform for community members to also share information about their organizations.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Abby?
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, for biological data standards specifically, there's an international organization called TADWIG, Biodiversity Information Standards. And for the biological data standards cluster, I am trying to make connections there. I do present work that the cluster has done at TADWIG conferences, and just trying to create more of a connection there, but the time zones do make it hard for that too.
Monica, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, my question's also in the chat, and this may be an overall question for ESIP and the international clusters. Especially as we reach toward the global south, have there been discussions on different knowledge systems and what counts as knowledge? Because for peoples who have been colonized, like my ancestors, we have a different relationship with the planet than what I learned in graduate school. And we have a different interpretation of what is valuable knowledge. So I just want to know, like, especially as we target the global south and colonized peoples, are we open, as I mean we, like ESIP and everyone, open to thinking, oh, this is a different way to accept knowledge. This is also quality data. This is also a quality way to understand the planet.
Okay, I'd just like to step back one from your question. That one thing that has frustrated me in running that group, the RDA group, is that it is, what can I say, dominated by the global north. That's Australia, Europe, and North America. Our biggest thing is to even connect with equivalent groups in Africa, Asia, South America, and we're starting to get some of those connections through CoData. And I think once we've kind of made those connections, then I think that's definitely something we should take on board. But you've no idea how hard it is to get the connections with the groups. And as I said, I've been trying through CoData with some success, but definitely, yes, it should be considered. And I think Mark put a comment in that yeah, ESIP and E2SIP have been participating in some of the venues. Bark, I see you've got your hand up.
Well, can I just say one thing? Because I do have, even as a Black American, I do know that some ways academia has approached me, has kind of made me defensive and not engage. So maybe the goal should not be to find the groups first with the same data alignment, but just sort of to go to these communities and say, can you teach us about your culture and make friends and get to know people? Because the reality is we have every reason to be suspicious of the global north. And even as I'm a colonized person whose ancestors were trafficked here. Yeah, so I think the first step is just getting to know people, and maybe the data will come later. But I'll go on mute.
Yeah, no, well, I guess what I was trying to say, it's just interesting that the Global South goes to conferences like IDW. They do present their work there, but they don't come to RDA. So anyway, yes, we need to build those relationships. And okay, so Mark, can I hand over to you? Mark? Or has my internet gone dead?
Sorry, now
Oh.
I'm here.
Make me think it's my internet again.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I was just losing the buttons. Monica makes a really good point. I think ESIP's involvement with Indigenous communities has been small. The one case I think where we may be doing it right, Monica, is with the Community Resilience Cluster. They're working closely with the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. And it's really being led by the Gita people, not ESIP. I'm only peripherally involved, so, but that's an effort that I think is going in a positive direction. There has been some collaboration, largely through RDA and the Indigenous Data Sovereignty interest group within RDA. It's worth noting that that's largely what the so-called Kansas countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, US, those colonized Indigenous peoples hasn't really hit the Global South as much. It is interesting to note that the CARE principles were initiated at an RDA meeting in Botswana, part of International Data Week. But that connection to the Global South has definitely been challenging, and not really our strength, honestly. And we could do better about that. I guess the other thing I just wanted to note in terms of international connections is that there has been off and on connections with CODATA, particularly around data rescue. Denise can probably say more about that. I think that there's a current data rescue group within CODATA that I don't think has strong connections to ESIP now, but originally came out of the stewardship committee or discussions there.
It's like we kind of international participation has been a challenge with that group in particular. You know, time zones, just getting people to, trying to meet people where they're at, but also live up to expectations of the overarching organization. The group, the current data rescue group, I don't think is officially on hiatus, but it's in practicality on hiatus with CODATA.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I should know better.
We can have a separate conversation about that.
But I guess maybe sort of one takeaway from all of this is that I think there is a ton of international connections at the individual level within ESIP. Some of it is strategic and deliberate. Some of it just is, people collaborate. And I know when RDA launched back in 2013, so maybe around the sort of 2014-15 timeframe, there was more deliberate effort, I think, within the clusters to like sort of designate liaisons and be more official about it. And I think that that's become much less official, but there's still a lot of cross seeding. And that I think there is a good relationship between ESIP and RDA in that ESIP uses RDA in a sense to not just internationalize its work, but to interdisciplinarize its work, if you will. And I think that's where it often more intersects with RDAs when we're looking for an interdisciplinary perspective as much as an international perspective. So I think that those were my comments, I think.
Mark, correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, was ESIP ever on the one of those boards, like the organizational board or one of
So
those?
that's a funny thing. We considered it early on after RDA launched. And RDA set up rules as to what is an affiliate. And one of the things is that it's a global organization. And at the time, for sure, ESIP did not consider itself a global organization. And so I think that was maybe a little off-putting, and maybe that would probably be reconsidered by RDA now if ESIP wanted to be an RDA affiliate. Honestly, and off the record, I'm not sure it gets you much. I think, the way we're doing it through the one interest group and then various targeted initiatives is probably more productive than trying to formalize things.
Yes, I agree with you. There are lots of connections, but yeah, that ESIP RDA group was just something where we're trying to connect the equivalent infrastructure groups. But I just wouldn't know how many ESIP connections there at the individual level there are into RDA interest groups and working groups.
Well, I think
look,
if you hold the clusters,
Yeah.
you would get a sense, because I think some
Okay.
clusters have deliberate connections. It's not just, people that happen to go to the same meeting. That some of the clusters, like the citation cluster, we have a deliberate connection with the dynamic data citation cluster within RDA, partly because I'm co-chair of both, but also we reference each other in our respective guidelines, for example. And so, and those groups are both mature and established, and so that relationship is, there's not a whole lot going on with it. But I know that there's other clusters like information quality that Bang was talking about, have very deliberate connections.
Okay, well, look, we better move on now. I just not going to trust my connection, so I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, who is going to kindly run a quick Slido poll for us, where we're just going to ask you some quick questions, and then we'll move on to a Jamboard exercise where you can spend 10 minutes thinking and putting ideas forward for us. And if you don't like using Slido or Jamboard, or in case technology fails, I've actually put the questions in the meeting notes. Yeah, what's it, a girl guide is always prepared. So Rebecca, can you take over the Slido, please?
Yes, sure. Hi. So everyone should have a Slido tab inside of the notes. If they don't, it's just been pasted in there by Shruti into our chat here. So if everyone can step across and have a look, that would be great. Likewise, I'll just paste in the Jamboard link. So everyone can just have a look at the questions that have been put in there.
They're separate questions, Rebecca. The idea was we go through these short questions, and then the Jamboard's more like a free text for everyone to say what they feel.
Okay. No, that's fine. Okay, cool. So I'm happy to walk through the questions so we can all just fill them in together. So first one is, what country are we all dialing from? Does anyone have issues getting to Slido? Excellent. I think we can just work through these questions in Slido by ourselves. Would you like me to share the responses, Leslie?
Yes, please.
No worries. Okay, I'll just share my screen. So here we go. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just trying to get back to the questions that, here we go. Oh dear. Sorry,
the
Leslie.
questions would be in the polls part.
Yeah. So in the polls here, I can only see this answer for the one question. Is anyone here available to help? I'm not sure if Megan's still here.
No, I'm just
I got it.
Oh, legend! Are you
Apparently,
okay?
I'm the one who's controlling that.
Excellent, excellent. Are you okay to share your screen?
I mean, I can, but you know, it's like as I can just change the question and apparently updates on yours.
Oh, excellent, excellent. That's good too. It's amazing technology these days.
Yes.
If you accidentally hit enter, it'll take it into the view. But if you hit edit response, it'll take you back to the questions.
Okay, so if I click edit response, I see.
You can go through and answer the rest of the questions now.
I was hoping to look at everyone else's answers collectively.
Well,
Rebecca, try the link in the chat.
Yeah,
sorry, what a disaster. Yeah, thank you.
What link in the chat?
I sent
Megan just
Rebecca
sent me one.
only a chat.
Thank you.
There you go.
Excellent. Here we go. So we have an interactive panel. Okay. Okay, cool. So we've got this list here. Excellent. Leslie, did you want to talk through the results or did you want me to do that?
I can. Oh, just, yeah, you do that. Just talk through
no
them.
worries. So we saw on that link that there was predominantly US people, but also lots of people from Australia and Germany and the United States, which is great. And my dog can, as always, pick up my energy and has started attacking my foot once I start doing work. Okay, so this is quite striking signal. So 100% of us think that we should have international connections with ESIP. And if you think it should, where is ESIP most needed? So RDA and conferences and a few other responses here, a lot to do with representation in other groups, strategic connections, information sharing, and coordination. Are there other groups or organizations that feel ESIP should start engaging? So there's co-data. I suppose that's something that the Australians are starting to get into through our World Fair group, but also we've got EGU, GEO, the European Open Science Cloud. Oh, great. And so INCOIS in India, and CO's WGIS. I actually don't know what that is. Is someone around that?
I do.
Great. What is that, Leslie?
I'm connected to it. It's
Excellent.
there's GEO and there's CEOS, which is the Committee on Earth Observations.
Oh, of
And
course. Okay.
WIGIS is the group I sent you that paper from a few days ago. They're the data informatics group.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So we can see people are still responding, and EOSC. Did anyone else have? I'll just wait a couple of moments here because people are still responding. That's all right. Okay, great. I might move on in the interests of time. International conferences. Okay, so EGU ahead of AGU. We've got the RDA EGU group, EGU and RDA, International Data Week, and participants. Is that a conference, or is that we should be participating in conferences? I'm unsure.
I'll just add, the reason I put this question in is that I think it was Susan said to me, she gets suggestions to go to all sorts of conferences or suggestions that ESIP should be at this, that, and the other. That was why we were asking which one is a priority. And I see Mark put in the chat that there is a call out for sessions at IDW. Now, do you think we could get a session around ESIP going, Mark? Okay, next question, Rebecca.
No worry.
I think you want to target it more than around ESIP, maybe around Earth science.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I think, were they open until the end of March, or was it the end of May for sessions? I feel like it was the end of May.
And no, I'm pretty sure it's end of March for,
okay.
And it's session and paper proposals all at once.
Oh, excellent. No worries.
So how do you know it's... Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, that's okay. So I suppose what's interesting here is that the signal I get from from this information is that the greatest need is everywhere. Particularly, we've got lots of the global south and also Africa, Middle East, China, India. So it's all of those places outside of Western Europe and North America. Yeah.
So picking up on Mark's comment, then organising a session at IDW. I don't know what the theme or the makeup of it would be, but this is somewhere where we can have a session about connection to the global south, the informatics of the global north with that of the global south in earth sciences. Yeah.
I think also what Monica raised previously was a really interesting comment about engaging in these regions as well. And so I'm not sure if that's something that can happen in parallel with current activities or if that's something that should take priority. I suppose that's something for discussion going forward. I don't know. Oh, yep. I was no, it's okay. I was
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I'll stick to point because I was going to throw to Monica, but that's something that we can discuss during the discussion time. I say which regions or countries, fertile ground for partnership to take root. Okay, so we've got here Europe is a big one, and Australia where there's already partnerships, but we've also got India and Latin America. And so I mean India is an interesting one, isn't it? Because there is that's been coming up a lot during these questions. Are there funding opportunities that exist to allow ESIP to better resource international engagement? Okay, State Department, USAID, UN perhaps. Yeah, we've got an interesting case in Australia we can talk about later, Leslie, perhaps with World Fair, with the EU funding as well. Okay. So membership fees. Yeah. Sorry, Leslie, you go.
That's
I think that's the end. Is that the end of the Slido?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Look,
Stop
this
share.
has been this has been useful. what I'd like to suggest is we're going to go into a Jamboard session now, but in the last 5 minutes, that's why I'm sorry, keeping an eye on the time, we need to get our 3 key takeaways. So I think the first one, just so that we can help formulate it, I'd like Monica to lead on one of the key takeaways that gets inclusive of her point. And Mark, I think you've hit the one that we actually do have international participation, but it's not coordinated. I don't know what our third one will be, but if we go into the Jamboard now, Rebecca, can you put the link to it?
Yep, Susan's put the link in
Susan's done
already.
the Jamboard.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want me to share the screen, or everyone's happy just to work on their own? No problem.
So I want to give you, say, 10 minutes. And if you look at the Jamboard, there are 2 boards. The first one is, what do you feel ESIP strategic international activities should look like? And the second board is more about that collaboration between at the individual and the clusters that ESIP runs. So just feel free to add post-it notes, etc., on either board, and then we can collate your opinions afterwards into a group. I like that comment that someone's put in with non-extractive collaboration with the Global South. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a Brazilian co-chair on the ESIP, the RDA ESIP group. And one of the things that he said, or the group he works with said, was that they know we have knowledge and we have expertise in databases, right? But say databases, but they want us to share that with them. They don't want us to take their data and put it in Western databases. And I think some of you know this has been a huge issue with, say, like at one stage somebody did a survey of the data on the Ebola virus, and 80% of that was locked up in Western databases that the citizens of the African countries could not get access to. Okay, and I see people, oh yes, you're giving lots of good suggestions on the second one. So Susan, I'd like to hand over to you because we kind of organised this session to help you. Is there anything you'd like to say or comment on what information you're getting back on the boards?
Thank you. Yes. Looking at the clock, 5:22. I read especially the first one and I'm just like, yes, 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 yes. I'm also at the same time terrified, and that is me being very, very honest and transparent with all of you, that with our, like, how do we, to do all of this would require a tremendous shift and probably a few more staff people, right? And that's not who we are today. You know, as we talked about, you know, how do you take something one bite at a time, right? How do you prioritize and strategize? Okay, what is the next most important, most impactful step? And then what is the next step after that? And what is the next step after that, right? There are some amazing, huge, impactful things here that I would love to just dive headfirst into, but would put our staff at a very strained position to do well. And so it's important to me that what ESIP does, we do well, because that reflects on our reputation, right? And if we say we're going to show up and do something, we do it. And that's challenging with a volunteer organization, right? Because the staff is here to support you all as the volunteers. And so kind of like the way our cluster model works, it would be interesting to potentially prioritize and rank these things and say, who's interested, see where there is critical mass and leadership, and then how can the organization support you all in taking those next steps is kind of my thought. You know, we have a little, our NASA funding allows us to do it. GEO is written in there. I believe RDA is written in there. So we can look at, you know, which strategic meetings and are we attending virtually or in person based on budgets. But that's kind of my thought. This is really important and really exciting. That's kind of my reaction. But curious to hear what others have to say.
Denise, your hand is up.
Denise, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, I was going to, you know, because I didn't know if Susan would be fully comfortable saying some of these things. I am one of those people who tries to, I love our staff. I love the ESIP staff. They do an amazing job and they want to do everything, but I'm protective of them. I don't want them to burn out. That said, there are, you know, there are things that most definitely should be led more by volunteers who are already engaged. But we also need to be mindful. I appreciate someone who is like, you know, if we're looking to engage like the Global South or other non-Western European US types, we may need to look at how we compensate them for that because they already lack those resources. So, you know, it is that balance between where we're at right now and what we can provide, while also helping empower others to do the work that needs to be done, or that, yeah. So finding that right balance, you know, with current resources, and not over promising what we can do, I think is really kind of where I'm at.
Okay, I'm gonna hop in because like I'm just like jumping like So the first step is to decenter ESIP, decenter whiteness, decenter like what we can provide, what we can do. The very first step is if we already have connections, ask them what they need. Because I can tell you as a person of color who has to deal with this every day in the country that I live in, one, the word volunteer makes my blood boil a little bit because we're so tired of providing free education about cultures that were taken from us actually at the point of death and that we've had to hide and are just now able to talk about how, for me, the trees have more value because that's where I can go feel my ancestors. So we've got to start there. We cannot go to these communities with plans already made. We go to them at step one and engage them, because if we don't, it's more white saviorism, it's more Western saviorism, it's more we know best, it's more we will lead and we will tell you what we have, as opposed to we will work with you to find the resources that we can use together. It's a shift in thinking. And that's where like the Hermes principles and the EJ principles, and there's Bhopal principles, there's all of these principles where people of color around the world saying, hey, if you want to work with us, here's what you need to do. And yet we are still met with our communities coming, here's what you should do, as opposed to engaging with us. And that whole concept of volunteerism is so steeped in privilege. And we need to re-examine that. So this may be a step where ESIP needs to do some internal work about ways to maybe decolonize ESIP and work with those who are already involved from other nations and say, hey, we would like to do that. I've tried to fill in the ideas in the 3 takeaways, but I'm having trouble scrolling the page over. Like there's already 3 takeaways on the, I saw the one with the boxes, and those 3 takeaways were already full.
No, sorry, I don't know where you're referring to. So firstly, I'm using the meeting notes.
Okay, I'll scroll down there and I'll add them, but I really think this may need, I do community engagement training with organizations because there's a way to do this without causing more harm. And if we think about like over promising, you just centered ESIP, and that's the wrong approach.
Yeah, but I also would like to make the point, because I have worked with CoData for nearly 15 years now. Part of my reason for wanting to connect with particularly some of the groups in Africa, is that they're doing absolutely brilliant work, and also in Brazil. And I'm trying to get that work. I'm not going in there telling them how to do something, or this is my way. I'm trying to get them to share what they're doing, because there's so much we could learn from them.
Well, that is the right approach. That's
the
actually what
approach
I'm
we're
saying.
taking. So yeah, I want to
Yeah,
make
but when
sure
we're
that
talking
you
about we
understand.
can't go in, but
No,
if we're going in and saying, I need to protect my staff, we can't overpromise, we need to see and like rank these to see where the interest is, that's what I'm responding to. It's that sort of us planning this when we've already got connections and somebody can just email CoData and be like, hey, can we have a chat? As opposed to us saying, we've already have some plans for what we want to do with you.
no,
Yeah, that's the, yeah.
So it's like I
We
said, I've
agree.
worked with them for years, and that's what I'm trying to get out of them, because they have some fantastic stuff. Look, we're at the hour. I've only got two key takeaways. I've tried to capture your ideas in the first one, Monica. Mark, I've tried to capture what you've been saying about, we've got this, what can you call, hidden connections that the ESIP community does not know about. And from the Jamboards, I mean, maybe it's worth considering is that at ESIP plenaries, we do run something on international activities where people do point out what they're doing and what they're connecting with. So the broader ESIP corpus is aware of this. And so, Carl, that would also mean you and Kathy presenting on what you're doing at GEO more regularly. Oh, sorry, Carl. Hope you don't mind.
That makes perfect sense.
Because I found that was fascinating, you saying what you're doing, but where does the ESIP corpus know about that? Oh, Mark. So I guess
Hey, I just want to make one last
5 minutes.
comment. I just want to make one last
Yeah.
comment because I think Monica's making some really good points. And so I came into this thinking internationalization, and we shifted some of the focus more on inclusion. And we got plenty of inclusion work that we need to do in the United States without going international. And so, and what Monica was saying about, prioritization implies, maybe sort of vicious choices. But if we're thinking about the international, maybe we need to focus on worrying about our own problems before we go out and hear about the problems of Ecuador and the Congo. We got plenty of stuff. So there's internationalization, and there's considering other ways of knowing and other perspectives. And then it's not the same conversation. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, Mark, there's so many, I really appreciate everybody leaning in and giving us all their thoughts on this. There is a lot to digest in terms of how we're currently structured as an organization and how we're resourced, and then how that impacts what we're able to do. I love that Nancy is here, not to call out individual people. Nancy is one of the co-chairs of ESIP's Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Justice Advisory Committee, which has just recently stood up. There's that piece of it. There's also a piece of just how do we connect across time zones around the world with our current community, and then how do we expand our reach and expand our impact if that is needed and what people want to do. So I'm looking forward to following up and kind of distilling and digesting all of this feedback and seeing where we can take it. One thing, Monica, I wanted to say, in some work we did recently with NASA, the volunteer piece is hard. This organization, it's a volunteer organization other than our 5 staff, and our staff work to empower in any way and lower barriers what we can for those. So 5 staff empowering all the volunteers that show up. And I recognize who is able to show up there are absolutely power dynamics and economic dynamics at play there. I was particularly proud that the environmental justice workshops that NASA had us do, I said, I will not do this work unless we can stipend participation, because it was getting feedback from organizations using NASA's data. And I said, hey, this feedback is for your benefit and they need to be paid for their time. That is slightly shifting the model we typically have had over time. And it's definitely something that I'll continue to explore because you're absolutely right. So I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank Leslie for raising the questions. Carl, everyone who spoke up for coming, and obviously stay tuned. There's more to come. So I appreciate you all being here and staying over. It's 5:34 on the East Coast, at least. I don't know what time zone you're in, but I hope that we see you all tomorrow.
Has someone saved the chat? Last comment?
Yes, it gets saved, promise.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Thank you everyone for coming.